Bobby Witt just signed the largest contract in the history of the Kansas City Royals. How does that relate to the Cubs? We're going to talk about it. Jorge Soler might have found a new team. At least there's rumors of such. If that's the case, does that affect the Cody Bellinger sweepstakes? I think it does. And the Cubs have announced their minor league coaches. We'll talk about that as well. Thanks for hanging out with us here on the Cubs Baseball channel. Make sure that you guys like and follow. Give us a thumbs up. Make sure you subscribe. Let's get this thing started. Go Cubs. Hey, it's Mick Gillispie. Welcome to the Cubs Baseball channel. Make sure that you follow at Broadcaster Mick, where we talk Cubs every day. And then when things happen, we talk about the Cubs more than just once a day. We talk about them a lot. But during the offseason, we've been coming at you with a show every single morning, and we appreciate all of you guys for being patient as we kind of navigate through this offseason, which really has been very interesting, to say the least. Well, let's start here. I'm going to start with this one first. Jorge Soler, former Cub. Remember him? Yeah, he was actually signed by the Cubs and developed by the Cubs and got to the big leagues with the Cubs. And you remember he was part of that 2016 World Series team. I'll never forget it. My first Cubs World Series game, Game 3, they lost, obviously, to the Indians. And he hit a line drive that turned into a triple, and he watched it. And I was always wondered, like, would that have been an inside the park home run had he ran that cold and windy night at Wrigley? I don't know, but it all turned out good. And then he was eventually traded for Wade Davis to Kansas City, and then led the league in home runs. And then he went to Atlanta on a trade and hit a towering, monstrous home run for the Braves and a World Series victory over the Houston Astros. Then he went to the Marlins, and now he's a free agent. And the San Francisco Giants are reportedly rumored to be talking to him about a contract. Now, if you signed him, an outfielder, a DH, would that eliminate you, or would that tell you that maybe the Giants aren't in this Cody Bellinger contract sweepstakes? Maybe they don't have the taste to pay Bellinger the $200 million that Scott Boras wants. The Giants and the Dodgers play a lot, right? They're arch rivals. And maybe they saw the struggling Bellinger. They obviously saw the MVP Bellinger. Maybe they don't have the $200 million. But whatever it is, when I saw this immediately, it just felt like another sign that Cody Bellinger doesn't have the amount of offers that you would think he has. You talked about yesterday's show where all of a sudden now the Phillies are in play, even though I don't believe that. I would be surprised. I could be wrong, but I would be surprised. And then hearing this, the Giants have been kind of one of those teams you would suspect. The teams that I think are serious players, the Angels and the Cubs. If I had to put my money on it, those would be the two teams. Maybe the Phillies, maybe the Mariners, maybe the Giants, but I think they're all long shots. I think it's the Cubs and the Angels, just because the Angels are going to have money without Ohtani. They need some reason for people to come to the ballpark besides Mike Trout. And the Cubs, who won him back. Now, you talk about what baseball teams are doing right now, and you're talking about when you get a potential franchise player, sign that guy before he goes into free agency. Now, Scott Boras clients aren't going to do that. They're going to test the waters. But not the case with Bobby Witt Jr. 11 years, 288 plus million guaranteed. There's a bunch of options in his contract, which honestly is pretty crazy. So let me give you the figures of this contract, right? This year, 2 million. Next year, 7 million. The year after that, 26, 13 million. 2027, 19 million. 2028, 30 million. And then from 29 to 34, 35 million. And then 33 million and 35. And then 36 to 37, 28 million. Yeah, I know that's confusing, but just think about all that money. Plus, there's opt-outs. He can test free agency in 2030, 31, 32, and 33. So they felt like the Royals that they had to sign him. Now, if he goes through all of the extensions and everything else there, this could actually be 14 years and $377 million. But Bobby Witt Jr. is, I think he's on the verge of this contract makes him the next Mike Trout. I mean, you're talking about an elite talent. And it's not like Kansas City is known for giving out big contracts, right? The biggest one before this was Salvador Perez, their World Series MVP, and I think a future Hall of Fame catcher, obviously one of the top catchers in baseball by far, $82 million. And then all of a sudden this monster of a contract. But it really brings to mind organizations identifying game-changing players and then signing them as soon as they can. And I read a story today in MLB Trade Rumors, and they do a great job. And they were talking about Jackson Cherio, who's I think he's the number one prospect, at least in some publications, the Brewers center field prospect. And they've already given him played one big league game, and they've given him $82 million. So they're saying, hey, it's a risk, but we're that confident that this guy's going to be good. And you see that Julio Rodriguez and Corbin Carroll, they brought up, two guys that signed contracts for big time money. Rodriguez of the Mariners got $210 million. And then Corbin Carroll, who we saw last year, boy, that guy is a pest, great player. And one of the best rookies I can remember seeing in a long time. He got $111 million. And those are, relatively small markets. I know that the Mariners sometimes spend big money, but, not the Arizona Diamondbacks. So interestingly enough, you keep an eye on this, how it relates to the Cubs. If a Pete Crow Armstrong comes up and really makes a good impression, and you're like, hey, you know what? Let's get this guy signed. And you do that. The Atlanta Braves were the masters of this with the Ronald Acuñas of the world, where you're like, hey, we might as well go ahead and get this guy signed now. But the Cubs did the same thing with Anthony Rizzo, where they paid him, and you knew that they knew who they had. I mean, he went from Boston, right, to San Diego, to the Cubs. Everywhere they went, and I'm talking about Theo and Jed, he went with them. He was like their baggage, right? And then he turned out to be a great player, one of the all-time greats, at least for the Cubs. And but they as soon as they could, they signed him, and it turned out to be a tremendous deal. So this one's a huge one, and I think that you'll see more teams trying to sign these guys before they get so good. Like, what if the Royals would have offered him $100 million? When he like Cheerio, before he even got to he hasn't even played a big league game yet for the Brewers, and he's already at $82 million. That's at risk, but he's going to be a really good player, and you can watch him play in the minor leagues and know that there is a risk involved in that too. And the risk is that if you sign someone and you pay him that kind of money, what if they don't pan out? And I think that's kind of the, that's the other part of this that you really have to be careful of. moving forward. So just something to talk about. Now, the final thing on today's show, as we wait for some big-time news to pop, is that the minor leagues have announced their coaching staffs. And here's the list right here. A couple guys I wanted to highlight. Buddy Bailey, who I've known for years. He's been in the Cubs system for a long time. I actually have an invitation of him. I want to find out if these guys are suspects or prospects. One of the all-time great characters. I think I've mentioned this before, but I mean, he was the Durham Bulls manager before the movie Bull Durham came out. And the producers actually watched him and his mannerisms. And if you watch the movie, the manager character is kind of like a character of Buddy Bailey, which is crazy. That was back when the Durham Bulls were a Braves affiliate years and years and years ago. And then, of course, Kevin Costner brought that character to life. So good to see Buddy back for another season. How about this? You remember Nate Spears came up through the Cubs system, eventually was with the Red Sox, second baseman. Fantastic guy, big leaguer. He's back as a hitting coach for the South Bend Cubs. So he'll be with Nick Lovello, whose dad is a big league manager. He was a coach in the Cubs system. Now he's the manager of that South Bend team. So good to see those guys. And, just a couple players I thought about when this list came out. Also, Rick Strickland, who did a great job in Double-A as the hitting coach, promoted to hitting coach in Triple-A, working with the great Marty Peavy. And Eric Patterson, you guys remember him, another former Cub. All right, that does it for the show today. Talking about minor league baseball, let me remind you guys that thanks to the generosity of the Tennessee Smokies, our show is presented by the Smokies. And they want me to remind you to go check out the Smokies team store, smokiesbaseball.com/store, for all the great gear that you want. Championship swag, like I'm wearing right here. Their first championship in 45 years. They have Cubs gear. They've got autographs from some of the hottest prospects. smokiesbaseball.com/store.